Hello again, it's time for my March wrap-up. Here is the challenge again, to grab all these books and not have them fall. Oh my god, this is heavy. This is what I read in March. That is an accomplishment. And besides all of those books, I actually read 3 other ebooks. 2 other books I've already talked about, Ace of Shades and Black Chuck. So I won't talk about them here. I like them both. Great books. You can watch my reviews on them. And the other book I read on ebook is Anya Alborn's Seed. I really enjoyed this novel. It was a really good Anya Alborn story. Probably one of my favorites so far. It's a short book, and it really does pack a punch. It's a really nice family unit. You know, Within These Walls I read, which was one of her more popular books, and that was kind of a more dysfunctional kind of broken family. This is a really, a husband, a wife, and 2 kids. The husband has this secret, and when he sees what's happening to his daughter, he kind of knows what's going on, but he doesn't want to share what's going on. And you see kind of this creepy climax kind of building in the book, because you don't really know what happened in that past. But you know he knows what's going on, and the wife is going crazy, and you see this kid change, and you see them dealing with it and dealing with it in their marriage, and it's a really good character study too. I'm going to give that 5 stars. I really liked Seed. I thought it was a really good Anya Alborn book. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free on Kindle Unlimited. In fact, a couple of her books are free on Kindle Unlimited that I'm probably going to read, and it's definitely one you should check out. Let me start getting to the actual physical books in no particular order here. Stephen King, the Bachman books. This has 4 books in it. 4 books when he wrote as Richard Bachman. The first one was Rage, which they say is a high school show and tell session explodes into a nightmare of evil. This is the controversial book that Stephen King actually pulled from the Bachman books because it is about a kid in a school shooting. And after Columbine and a bunch of the other shootings, he's pulled this book from future releases. So anytime you buy the Bachman books now, you will only get 3 novels, not 4. It's not a bad story, but it's not a great story. I could see why it was pulled, especially considering the amount of school shootings since this book has take place. It's more of kind of a mental kind of mind game that this gunman plays with the people who he has hostage in the classroom. I would probably give it like a 3 stars. I really didn't find it that enjoyable. It was just basically your standard Stephen King book, but not anything to write home about. The next book was The Long Walk, which I know a lot of people on Booktube talked about. A lot of people love this book. Premise is really interesting. Basically, these kids walk from, I guess, the tip of Maine, I believe it is. Keep walking. They have to keep walking at about 4 miles an hour. Yeah, about 4 miles an hour, I think. And if they walk any slower, they get warnings. After 3 warnings, they get shot. And it's basically who can last the longest, who can survive the long walk. And while the premise was interesting, I really didn't like the ending. And there wasn't really too much backstory of why this walk was happening. They talked a little bit about the result, which was kind of in question. I'll be honest with you, it just didn't connect with me. I know a lot of people like that second book, but it really didn't connect with me. And again, I'm going to give it another 3 stars. I really liked the characterizations in it, but I really wish there was more development of a backstory. I wish there was a little bit better conclusive ending than it had, and it just left me as a book I really wasn't as interested in as I thought I would be. The third book is Roadwork. It's What Happens When One Good and Angry Man Fights Back. Is Murder and Then Some. I liked Roadwork. I actually liked it more than the first 2. Again, it wasn't a great story, but it was an interesting story about a man who loses everything with this new highway that's coming into town, and he's going to lose his house and he loses business, and he fights back pretty much the only way he knows how. And you see, the destruction of his family, destruction of a lot of things in his world. Again, it wasn't a great book, but I would definitely give it higher than the first 2. I'd probably give it about a 3.5. I thought it was an okay story, better than the first 2. But again, not one of the top Stephen King books I've read in a while. And that comes to the 4th book, which is The Running Man. In the year 2025, the best men don't run for president, they run for their lives. When you think of The Running Man, you think of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. The book is a lot different. I mean, not totally different. It's still a man. He's still on the run. People are still trying to kill him. But it's not like a studio audience thing. It is kind of a game show. It reminds me more of like an Amazing Race type of game show than what the movie actually showed you. Even though it's set in the future, it's not really too futuristic, and it deals with a lot of issues. It deals with poverty, and it deals with class, and it deals with people's insatiable need for violence, and how people paint other people. I mean, I don't know when this book came out, but it's definitely kind of a precursor to the reality show as far as how people paint the narrative of a person. It did have a lot of racial epithets that might be disturbing to some people, but all in all, I really liked The Running Man. I was very surprised by the book. I was very surprised by how interested I was in the book and interested in the characterizations and in the political message it kind of has, which I don't see too much King doing that in his books as much, and this was really an interesting book. I'm going to give that at least a 4-star, maybe even a 4.5. I really did enjoy The Running Man. So out of this Bachman book set, 2 I thought was 1 was okay, and 1 I thought was really good. I might suggest you just buy The Running Man if you can find it in a single copy instead of buying the whole Bachman books. But that's my review for the Bachman books by Stephen King. Hellhound by Ken Greenhall. This was really interesting, especially the introduction by Grady Hendrix. He talks about how this was a Zebra Press novel. And the title, Hellhound, is misleading because there is no kind of satanic thing in here. It's got nothing to do with hell. It's basically about this dog Baxter and how he kind of moves to try to finds the perfect master. And it's a really good book. I mean, it's short. It's only 140 pages. I love this book. I mean, I'm giving this a 5-star. This was such a well-written book. The prose in it was nice. The way the dog was talking about life and seeing it from his perspective was so good. I really enjoyed this book. Hellhound by Ken Greenhall. The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. Again, another book I loved. I had a lot of good books this month, actually. Okay, so basically what the story is about is 2 centuries ago, these 3 women were charged with witchcraft and were executed, were buried at sea. And the story basically was about these 3 women who flirted with the men of this town because of that, because of their promiscuity. And because of their promiscuity in 1822, they were classified as witches. And that, of course, that they had to be using some kind of magic on these men to get them to sleep with them. And the ironic thing is, the town actually turns these women into what they thought they were, which were basically seductresses, who now, every summer, lure young boys into the sea and drown them. And it becomes a big event, and a lot of people come to the town. It becomes kind of a tourist event every summer to see at least 3 kids die. Kids go missing, and then you find out that they've drowned in the ocean. And I really like the story. I really like the way it was written. I mean, it's very predictable. That's probably the one thing that would probably knock it from a 5-star. It's to knock it down to maybe a 4-star because it is incredibly predictable. You kind of know exactly where it's going. I still enjoyed it. Even though I knew exactly where it was going to go, I still really enjoyed this book. And the cover is really nice, especially it has a nice inside cover for those who are interested in those cool little designs. A really good book. It's really not more about sirens than witches. That's really what I classify these women as. But it's still a great book. I would highly recommend it. This is a YA book that is written in a style that I don't see too often. It almost reads like a fairy tale, even though it's a modern story. Again, I really enjoyed it. The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw. Next book is the first of a series that a lot of people have talked about. This is a pretty old series. And I finally decided to pick it up when I saw it on Barnes & Noble. And this is the first book in the Expanse series by James A. Corey, Leviathan Wakes. I see what the hype is about, and now I gotta read all the other books in this series. This was another great book. I was amazed at the twists and turns, the character development, the way the characters are written, the action, the story, everything about this book, and it's a huge book, is just so interesting and so amazing that I can't even imagine where the story's going to go. And I know there's like a ton of books in this series, maybe like 7 books or so. I got a lot of reading to do to continue this series, but if it's as good as this first book, and I've heard people say it even gets better, this is great. If you like sci-fi, space opera type of story, if you like, an intricate kind of plot, twists and turns that you're not going to see coming, Leviathan Wakes is definitely a book you should definitely read. I highly recommend it. 5 stars. Great book. I am so glad I finally got to read it, and that's my review for this book. One book I DNF'd, Heart of Iron. I could not get into this book, and I think about 250 pages I read to try to really give myself a chance to read this, but I was just going through the motions. I really had no interest in the characters or what was going on. Just not a book for me. This book I talked about on my Joe Hill author spotlight, which is Heart Shaped Box. I did enjoy this book. This is one of my enjoyable Joe Hill books, like a 4-star, I believe. This and Horns are somewhat similar. If you want to know more about this book, watch my author spotlight, and I talk more about the Joe Hill book, Stephen King, Cycle of the Werewolf. This is out of print from what I can tell. When I looked on Amazon to find it, I had to buy a used copy. And basically what the story is there are pictures, and every month there is a story. A little 1-page or 2-page story, and then you go to the next month, and then there's another little picture and 1 or 2-page story, and it's really a complete story. It starts off kind of seeming like just separate stories, but it really is a complete story that goes through all 12 months. And I don't know if this was the basis or inspired by the Silver Bullet movie that Stephen King wrote. It does have some characters from that movie in this. I really like this, though. I honestly, it's not great, and the writing is okay, but it's just the way it flowed and the way the story went from month to month. And each month, kind of some of the months had themes. Like there was a theme for Valentine's Day, for February. It was really good. Again, I just really enjoyed it. I'm gonna give it a 4-star. I wasn't crazy about Silver Bullet movie. It was okay, but this book, I really enjoyed the artwork. I really enjoyed the story, and if you find it anywhere cheap, I would definitely tell you to pick it up. It's called Cycle of the Werewolf. Diabolic, another great book. I honestly had a really good reading month this month. I was surprised at actually how much I like this book because of the twists and turns in it. Again, it has really good characters. It is basically fantasy. I would say somewhat, because there is some genetic modification in here, so it is kind of sci-fi fantasy a little bit. But I just totally enjoyed this story. I really enjoyed the character of Nemesis. There is so much character growth that she goes through in this book. If you're a person who likes character and you like to see character growth in a story, this book has it. The character of Nemesis has a lot of things she has to wrestle with in this book. Again, I can't even give it high enough praise. I would probably give it at least a 4.5. I don't know if I would go all full 5-star, but I really like this book. I have to pick up the second book now because I've read this. That's the problem when you find out all these new books. You gotta keep picking up the rest of them. I really like Diabolic. Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I read Renegades, and I know the Lunar Chronicles is a really popular book, so I picked up Cinder. Humans and androids crowd the launcher streets of New Beijing. A deadly plague ravages the population. From space, a ruthless lunar people watch, waiting to make their move. No one knows that Earth's fates hinges on one girl. 16-year-old Cinder, a gifted mechanic, is a cyborg. She's a second-class citizen with a mysterious past and was reviled by her stepmother. But when her life becomes intertwined with the handsome Prince Kai's, she suddenly finds herself at the center of an intergalactic struggle and a forbidden attraction. Caught between duty and freedom, loyalty and betrayal, she must uncover secrets about her past in order to protect her world's future, because there is something unusual about Cinder, something that others would kill for. I enjoyed this book, but I really didn't enjoy the ending because it ended to me a little too abruptly. I wanted to know more. I feel like this book I was like, it's done? I was like, this is like the best part now that's about to happen, and it ended abruptly. But I am looking forward to the next book, and I will be reading it. So this is another 4-star read. I did enjoy it. Okay, the next book I read, a little different from the other ones, is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This is basically a modern classic. Esther Greenwood is brilliant, beautiful, enormously talented, and successful, but slowly going under, maybe for the last time. In her acclaimed and enduring masterwork, Sylvia Plath brilliantly draws the reader into Esther's breakdown with such intensity that her insanity becomes palpably real, even rational, as accessible experience as going to the movies. A deep penetration into the darkest and most harrowing corners of the human psyche, The Bell Jar is an extraordinary accomplishment and haunting American classic. I did enjoy this book. It is bittersweet knowing that this author actually died by committing suicide after this book was published. I believe you see a lot of her in this book, even though it's a fictional book. A lot of people compared it to like A Catcher in the Rye for women, like a Holden Caulfield type of story, and I could see that, but unlike Holden, who kind of realizes he needs people at the end, Sylvia and this character kind of just chugs through life. There is a lot of feminist issues to deal with in this story, especially at the time this takes place. I believe in the 50s. You get to see how women are thought of as far as from the character's eyes of Esther and the friends around her, and it isn't pretty. It is a sad book, but I am happy I read it. I thought it was a really good book to read. I'm going to give it 5 stars because I do think it's a very important, powerful book, and it's an emotional book. Again, I just really enjoyed the glimpse into somebody's life, especially at such a vulnerable time. Even though, like I said, this is a fictional book, but I think she covered some interesting topics in this book, and especially about mental illness, which we still haven't even today do not deal with well, and depression and other issues that this book covers. A really good book to read if you're interested in picking up some modern classics. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, I would definitely suggest reading. 0 Day by Ezekiel Boone. The trilogy is done. This is the trilogy that started in The Hatching, then went to Skitter, and now it is 0 Day about killer spiders. If you haven't watched my channel enough, you don't know that I love this series. This is a thrill ride series. Very small books, all 3 of them. They are globe hopping books. They become epic stories, even though they're short. Ezekiel Boone does a great job with bouncing between different places, still telling you a very compelling story. I didn't like this book as much as the other 2. I don't want to spoil it too much because it is a 3rd book in a series, but there aren't a lot of killer spiders doing killer spider things in this book. This book is more about the ramifications, the political maneuvering, and which are really good, but it's not killer spiders killing people as much as the first 2 books were. But I still liked the trilogy. I'm still glad I read it, and I still would recommend this. The first 2 books I probably would give 5 stars, and this one maybe a 4. But I love this book. I love this series, and if you're gonna pick up The Hatching from Ezekiel Boone, definitely pick it up, and you'll have fun. It's an action adventure thrill ride type of book, and that's my review. Crooked Kingdom. Again, this is a sequel to the first 6 of Crows, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. I wasn't a big fan of 6 of Crows if you watched my review on it, but I picked up Crooked Kingdom and 6 of Crows together, so when I read Crooked Kingdom, I realized that it's better than 6 of Crows. For me, anyway. I actually felt more comfortable with all the characters. I felt their motivations a little bit more in this book because of what happened in the first book. If 6 of Crows was maybe a 3 or 3.5, this would be like a 3.5, maybe 4. Because I actually did enjoy this a lot more than 6 of Crows. It's still not my favorite series, actually, by Leigh Bardugo. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it more than 6 of Crows. And that's my review for Crooked Kingdom. Speaking of popular series on Booktube, I have read now Book 3 and Book 4 of The Mortal Instruments. City of Glass is Book 3. City of Fallen Angels is Book 4. Obviously, I can't talk too much since this is the 3rd and 4th book of a series. What I could tell you is the 3rd book so far has been my favorite. This concludes the series. That's a trilogy, kind of, which I didn't realize. It's basically the first 3 books of the Mortal Instruments series is kind of a trilogy. And this wraps up the trilogy very nicely in my mind, and the 4th book kind of takes from there and kind of unites it more, kind of takes it in a different direction. I wasn't as crazy about this 4th book. This 3rd book, though, is like a 5-star. This one is maybe a 4. You will see in my book haul, I do have the 5th book, so I will be reading that. I am enjoying this series. I can understand now why so many people have enjoyed the Mortal Instruments series. An interesting series. I can't wait to finish the whole series. I probably will be reading it. That's my review for both of these 2 books. Another series of books, which I also talked about, which is Gemina, Illumine, and Obsidio. You can look at my review. I love this series, especially if you like sci-fi and YA and romance and space opera, and again, a lot of twists and turns and a lot of interesting characters. Pick up the Illumine files. It's a great series, even though it looks really big, and I know a lot of people say that. It looks really big because it's written in like little text and pictures and stuff. You could just zoom through some of these books. Like I said, it's thrill ride. I really enjoyed it. Anya Alborn book, Brother. I did like this book. Now, I know some people have compared it to like a Wrong Turn or maybe like a chainsaw type of thing. I don't really think of it that way. It's really centered on this guy, Michael. And yes, this family are killers, and they are pretty much nasty, kind of definitely slasher type killers that you would see in maybe a Rob Zombie story or something like that. But there aren't any mutants. It's really more about this guy, Michael, and his relationship with his brother, Rebel. The title Brother is very apropos for the way this book handles this story. And I don't want to give away too much, but I did enjoy this book. This is a little bit more dirtier, more gruesome if you're interested in that, because of the nature of the kills. So if you're interested in the gruesomeness of horror, Brother, you will probably really enjoy. I think I'm glad I read it, and Anya Alborn is definitely becoming one of my favorite horror writers. And if you sat through this long March wrap up, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.